Yes.
TV, okay.
I take care of the one on the admin.
West up on Academy.
Okay. All right, it's 7:02 p.m. I'm sorry. I'll call this meeting of the DRB to order. It's February 17th, 2016. The first order of business is to go through remarks that I do at every meeting. And I'm sorry if you have to hear these for the second time. I know a couple of you have been here, but this is our procedure. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, the Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that as we are on the record, this is your opportunity, and your only opportunity perhaps, to comment on and provide evidence related to an application. In the event our decision is appealed to the environmental court, that court will not take or consider additional testimony at its hearing, but will look at the evidence from our hearing, the regulations or applicable law, and determine if the evidence supports the findings in the decision of this board. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding may appeal a decision made by this board, so I strongly encourage all of you to speak up at this hearing. As we're on the record, we're going to ask that you affirm your testimony will be truthful. So would the applicants and anybody who might possibly wish to speak to an application, please raise your right hand and I'm going to swear you in. Stand up too, I suppose. Sorry. I hereby swear or affirm that the testimony I'm about to give in the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. Okay. Thank you. Applicants require a majority vote of the full board to succeed. That means 4 votes out of 7. If we do not have a full board present to hear your application, then we will consider a request to continue your application to the next public meeting. After taking testimony, the board will close the public hearing and may vote on your application. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application, it is the written decision that controls the timeline for appeal. It should be noted that the town of Brattleboro is a party with an interest in land development applications. The town does not have a special status before this board. Documents provided to the board by the town planning department, town attorney, or other town departments will be considered in exactly the same way as information from the applicant and all other interested parties. The first item on our agenda is to review and approve the minutes of the previous meeting, and we're also going to approve the minutes of our quote-unquote meeting, which was our training on January 20th with Attorney Slason. So if I could please have a motion to approve the January 20th and January, well, they were both on January 20th, but the 2 different minutes from the meeting and the training.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Bannon, has our meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Are there any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications that anybody on the board wishes to disclose?
On 2015-204.
Okay, so that's the E&C properties. So in that case, Mr. Whittle, you're only alternate sitting right now, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so Whittle is appointed to 2015-204. Any other conflicts of interest or ex parte communications? Mr. Bannon.
David should be appointed to hear all hearings as Mike Goon is absent.
Oh, we're 1 man short, okay. So what that means is David Whittle will be appointed on all hearings, and for the E&C properties hearing, we will have a 6-person board, and I can see that that applicant is not here.
He is representatives.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're the representative for ENC Properties?
Yes.
So,
For John.
Chris Eustace, right?
Yes.
Okay. When we have a short board, what we do is you have to get 4 votes to get an application approved no matter what. And because Mr. Bushy has a conflict here, you're going to get a board of 6, so you're going for 4 votes out of 6 rather than 4 votes out of 7. Generally, as a matter of courtesy, we give people the option to continue and try to get a full board of 7 if you wish. I'm content to start the hearing and you can see how it goes before you make that decision. But just something for you to keep in mind, okay?
Okay.
So the first application is 2015-204 ENC Properties. If you could, have you ever done this before?
No.
If you, what we have you do is come and sit at this table, please. And we've got a microphone there so that they can hear you on public access. And I know I just asked your name, but since you weren't in front of the microphone, if you could just identify yourself so that the people on TV can hear you.
My name is Chris Eustace.
Okay, and you're authorized to represent ENC Properties at this hearing?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Is there anything you want to tell us about the project? And before you start, was everybody here for Mr. Brunel's presentation last board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
I don't necessarily have something to say in particular. I was just hoping to come here and act as a representative for any possible issues you guys might have.
Okay. Has the memo from the planning department gone to Mr. Brunel, do you know?
I don't think John has seen it, but
We received a memo from the planning department that raises a couple issues that I'm going to ask you about, but it may be helpful for you to review it. I'll give you a second.
This
Oh, this is the same thing. Okay, so you do have that. Okay. So the first, I felt like we discussed the issues pretty well at the last meeting, and I was going to go right through the issues raised by the planning department, unless anybody else has questions. Okay. So the first issue the planning department raised was that the driveway locations along the western property line, rather than where it's currently located across the eastern line. And the Public Works Department expressed a concern and requested that you get a letter from the engineer stating that there was an adequate site distance complying with VTrans standards. You saw that in the memo?
Yes.
Do you have a response to that suggestion?
I'm not aware of any consultation with an engineer. As far as the driveway goes, my latest understanding is that there was an existing driveway in use that belonged to the abutting property now owned by Cheshire Oil. As of now, I know John has put in a request to keep use of that driveway despite it currently being on land owned by Cheshire Oil.
Okay. So that would result in circulation on the east side of the building rather than the west side?
Correct.
Okay. But it would basically be the same design except the road between the front and the back lots, if you will, would be a mirror image of what we see on the plan?
It could be, yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm not trying to nitpick here, I'm just trying to imagine this because I haven't been to the site, that's all. But oh, I'm sorry. No response from Cheshire Oil yet, though?
No, not yet.
Sorry.
So the house that's there stays, you have the extension in the back,
Correct.
and then the driveway would go between this property and the storage?
I don't think, it might be possible depending on what we hear back from Cheshire Oil, but in all likelihood, at least for the curb cut where it is now would stay, and then the parking lot would look as it is on the plan now.
So the driveway could either go this way or that way?
Possibly it could stay on the east side, yes.
You saw that there was a note here that the sidewalk details are not very specific. Do you know what the width, base course, curb detail, ramp grades, etc., surface material are going to be?
I do not.
Do you have a standard depth at least that you do your sidewalks at?
Typically, it could be 6 inches or more.
Okay, but not less than that?
No.
And do you know if there's going to be a grade at all here? Or is this, I mean, I understand this to be generally a pretty flat parcel.
It's currently grading towards the easterly direction.
Okay.
For the most part, it's downhill all along Black Mountain.
Can you estimate what the grade is, roughly where the sidewalk will fall at the front of the building, however you want to put it?
I couldn't tell you.
Is it say more than 5 degrees?
Close to 5 degrees.
Close to 5 degrees? Okay. Is it less than 10 degrees? I mean, would you
Yeah.
be comfortable saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. And am I correct to assume that the sidewalk would be concrete?
Correct.
Okay. And would there be a curb separating it from the parking lot? Or something along those lines?
As of right now, I don't know.
Okay. But in any event, you could do that in a way that would satisfy the Department of Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with respect to the bioretention areas, there was some concern that without a grading plan, the water wouldn't drain to the receptors within that area.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're going to grade it to ensure that the water gets where it needs to be to the bioretention area?
All I can say is it's generally, the grade is from the west to the east.
Uh-huh.
So keeping the bioretention centers as far east as possible to try and collect as much natural rain flow across the impervious part of the construction is pretty much all we've estimated for so far.
Am I right to assume that each of those lots is going to be slightly graded so that the low corner is where the bioretentions are?
Correct.
And is there a standard pitch you do when you're trying to drain water?
For that distance, it could be as much as a ½ inch per foot.
What does that work out to?
I don't know what the width of the property is off the top of my head. But
1%.
That's 1%? Thank you. That's helpful.
That's pretty much standard for a parking lot.
And would it be possible to provide a plan with contours so that this can be illustrated?
we can if necessary, yes.
Okay. And something that has a cross section on the swale?
Sure.
Do you know what the plantings are going to be in the bioretention areas?
Other than what's listed, I don't.
Okay. But you could do something that the zoning administrator would approve as consistent with the bioretention area so that the drainage works properly?
Yes.
So, you see we discussed this with Mr. Brunel last time. The only landscaping on here are 3 dogwood trees, but I think he indicated that there was actually more planned.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I am not aware of any additional landscaping at this point.
Okay. I assume that doing some other landscaping would be feasible, especially if you're able to use the driveway on the eastern side, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you could do something that would be approved by the zoning administrator?
Yes.
If you did have the driveway on the east side, is there room there where you could put some landscaping to give a little buffer to the Cheshire Oil property?
Yeah, there probably is.
I mean, probably just a few feet, right?
Maybe not even that.
Okay, but enough to put a couple bushes or,
Yes.
or trees or something like that. Arbor vitae or something. Is there going to be a dumpster there?
I don't believe so. Is that something that was discussed last time?
Yeah, I think Mr. Brunel said last time that he expected to do the city trash pickup.
Oh,
which-
okay.
Which still leaves me some concern, because I'm not sure where people are, first of all, we're gonna go to every other week trash, and people are gonna have some place to store it. And
You mean
there's
every
gonna
other
be-
week?
what?
You mean every other week?
Every other week, yeah.
I wish
And-
twice a week.
And there's going to be compost carts, I assume, and recycling. And unless we go to single stream recycling, there's going to be, every unit's going to have 2 recycling bins. So I think you need to think about where people are going to put those.
Okay. If necessary, we can absolutely make room.
Is there an area between the sidewalk and the parking lot that you could put trash cans on? I mean, I can see that it's 3 feet, but I think it's a swale, right?
Yeah, that would be the swell there.
Could you put stuff there, or is it going to be too?
I think it might be too difficult in that
Okay.
particular area.
What about on the east side of the driveway? There's about a 4-foot space between the bioretention area on the north side and the street on the south side. Can you put stuff there?
Yeah, that could work.
Okay, that's flat?
Yes.
Okay. So there was a note here about the light fixtures, the shielded wall pack lights on the building, which are, as far as I know, acceptable. But there was a note from the planning department that those are pretty commercial in nature, and that it would be nice if you chose a fixture that is more in character with the residential building. Are there any alternatives there that you guys might be able to put?
Absolutely. There's an array of residential tech we could use for that. Absolutely.
And the note in the planning department's memo about parking, I think that is erroneous. And we already discussed at the last meeting the fact that the parking is sufficient under the current zoning ordinance for the 3 apartments.
Okay.
Did you see the fire department memo?
I did not.
It says you need a permit from the Division of Fire Safety, and the west side of the parking lot should be posted with a fire lane sign, and I assume that would hold true for the eastern side if you
were
end up
on that
using the
side.
eastern driveway, assuming they're connected in the same way. No problem doing that?
Nope, no problem.
Okay. And you can get a construction detail of both the sidewalk and the swale of Public Works?
Yes, we can do that.
That sounds pretty good. Does anybody have any other questions?
I'm just trying to get in my mind what it means to use a driveway, a curb cut on the east side.
Okay,
Now, that's down on Cheshire's property.
correct.
So you go in and immediately turn left or go all the way down?
It could either be as it is shown now, where they come in there and turn left to go around, but I'm not sure to the extent of how much of the Cheshire Oil's property we could gain through the use of the existing driveway. So it may be possible that it would just go straight to the rear of the building.
Did you say that the Cheshire Oil driveway would be a different curb cut or the same curb cut?
About the same. It's just to the right of where it's shown now.
Oh, okay. But it would be a straight line to the back.
Yes.
It wouldn't be you're turning in and then essentially having to make a U-turn if you made a right in
Right.
from Black Mountain Road. It would be a nice 90-degree turn. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Does that clear that up for you?
Well, yeah, it does in a way, but you'll still use the other curb cut on there?
Well,
Would that create one-way traffic going around, or what's your thinking?
at this point, I don't know exactly how much land we can gain from using Cheshire Oil's property. Depends on the outcome of that. In all likelihood, what we get is the existing curb cut that would pull in and almost do the exact same layout as shown there.
Okay, understand.
Would the bioretention area stay in the same place even if you use the eastern driveway?
Probably not.
Would they switch to the other side of the lot?
Yes.
Okay. And are you able to put that grade necessary to drain into those?
Yes.
Even though the natural slope goes the other way? Yes. Okay.
So the parking spaces would still be down here and up here?
If the driveway were completely on the east side, they would probably be almost entirely in the back. Yeah.
But the number of spaces is not going to change?
No.
Okay.
So you would have 6 parking spaces in the back?
Possibly, yes.
5 anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5, I'm sorry.
And can the corner where you currently show parking spaces, can that be planted or something so that
That could be green space, yes.
green space?
Do you have any other plans for it if you're able to?
I don't at this moment.
Okay.
If you don't get the Cheshire, what does that put you in a position as far as the driveway is concerned? Because it would still stay on the side, on the west side, right?
It would, remain almost exactly as it is now.
So, according to what the planning board suggested, that wasn't a good idea. They didn't particularly like where it was located.
Is there a second memo from the planning board?
I don't have it. I don't know.
I
Did they mention that, or was that the?
I mean, I saw that they suggested that it be relocated so that there be less impervious surface.
Okay. All right.
But I didn't, I may have missed something. I didn't see that the circulation was going to be problematic.
Okay.
Feel free to correct me if you guys are aware of something that I'm not. Okay. Are there any comments from members of the public? Okay.
I'd like to just hold on this for one more
Yeah,
second.
sure.
If you put a driveway in, that will also be paved?
Yes,
So that's going to give a significant increase in impervious surface there.
you mean if the driveway is on the east side?
Yes.
Yeah, we would eliminate some of the parking, what's shown now, if the driveway is on the east.
We're gonna go to green space there instead of parking. If the-
You would, the front lot as it stands now and west driveway would become green space,
Correct.
but you'd have a strip of pavement on the east side running from
To the-
south to north,
Correct.
and a slightly bigger lot in the back, a little more impervious surface in the back that connected to the driveway.
Yeah. Or it could be roughly the same size parking space in the back and having 1 or 2 spaces out front again, but
Okay.
still it would be smaller.
But either way, you need
Impervious.
enough pavement to make that work.
Correct.
And my assumption is if they're all grouped in the back, you need slightly less overall because you only need one turnaround area.
Correct.
Okay.
So could we safely say that if you put the driveway in, you would gain an equal amount of impervious surface in the
Maybe
front?
it might be less than what's shown now.
Less impervious?
Yes.
Okay.
Would it also be 13 feet wide, just as this one is?
I don't know what the existing driveway is in terms of width,
Okay.
so I'm not sure.
Is there any reason that it would be significantly different from that?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? My suggestion is that someone make a motion to approve the distance, including conditions that the applicant provide sidewalk details to DPW and get their approval. An engineered plan with contours at a cross-section of the swale. And and I'm talking about the swale and the bioretention area, along with details of the plants that would be in there that must be approved by the zoning administrator. A landscaping plan that has to be approved by the zoning administrator. A designated area where the trash is going to go. That doesn't interfere with the front sidewalk or traffic. Lighting fixtures that are more residential in character. A permit from the Vermont Division of Fire Safety, and no parking fire lane signs in whichever driveway, whether it's on the east side or the west side of the building. Those are the conditions I had.
Could we put a condition in there on the driveway, that if they put the driveway in on the east side, it wouldn't increase the amount of impervious surface overall? That we give it back someplace else?
We could do that. I mean, there's a possibility that's impossible. You were gonna say something, Karen?
Whatever change they make to that should be approved administratively, maybe.
Okay.
That could be one of the factors that to look at.
So he has to look at that under the zoning bylaws,
Okay.
under the ordinance. So why don't we add a provision that the zoning administrator has to approve the design for a new driveway? If it's not as shown on the plan that we have. Anything else I'm missing? So if somebody makes that motion.
We'll have to repeat all that?
No.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The next and the only other item on our agenda is Brattleboro, do I call it Orley?
It's shorthand for O'Reilly.
Oh, okay.
But-
Brattleboro O'Reilly for E. James Roberts Revocable Trust, application 2016-11. Have a seat. And thank you for coming again.
What would be the best place to set up a quick stand right here? I can angle it out.
Does this thing still work? Oh, do you actually have the stand in there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What we generally try to do is to get it as tight to this wall as possible so that the video camera can pick it up.
Sure, no problem.
It's different than what we have.
Great.
Very good.
Yeah, both of them.
Oh, wow, yeah, of course. Who's the closest one to Brattleboro now? I'm just curious. I hear him on local radio.
Oh, the song. The song is infectious.
Yes, I have
Oh, with
the
that.
pleasure, yeah.
O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Closest to I've never been to one of the stores, but I feel like I know it when you say that.
From a child.
It's a very effective jingle. So, leaving aside the jingle, please tell us about your project.
Certainly. You probably recall that we were here not all that long ago, and the purpose of that, well, for the record, Austin Turner with Bowler Engineering. I'm joined this evening by Patrick Natriba from Lascotti Development and Sean Vando, also from Bowler Engineering.
Thank you for remembering to do that.
No problem.
It's my responsibility.
No problem. It's easy just to jump right in.
Yeah, right.
So you might recall we were here, and the purpose of our appearance previously in front of the board was really to solicit some feedback on our initial application, take that feedback and then incorporate it into the formal design submittal, which the board has before you this evening in that giant stack of paper. The plan is largely similar to what you had seen previously, with the exception that it's been fully engineered now, and we did a complete analysis relative to compliance with the zoning ordinance and things of that nature. One thing, and we can get into it in any fashion at the board first, we're seeking relief on a couple of different fronts, and we had talked about those kind of superficially at the last hearing. We're proposing, we're seeking two waivers. One is for an encroachment into the side yard building setback. Second is to exceed the allowable impervious surface. They're both actually, those waiver requests are kind of linked in that the building encroachment into the northern boundary, which on the rendering would be plan left, enables us to actually get more pervious surface and landscaping and put a further buffer along the southern boundary. We're reducing impervious surface from the existing condition by about 16%. We're still going to exceed the requirement, but it's a substantial improvement over an existing non-conformity. So we're seeking a waiver on both those fronts. There's also an item for which we're seeking a variance. That item would be to be below the minimum building height. As you may recall, there was some brief discussion about that last time where the dirt, the soil out here is largely unsuitable, and as a result, we're doing very, very significant upgrades to the foundation. We went through that last time, and the board requested that we get an opinion of a licensed structural engineer to kind of support that claim, which we provided a letter from a licensed structural engineer talking about some of the difficulties that would make increasing the building height problematic. The crux of that argument essentially is that adding the additional height to the structure creates increased wind loading and lateral loading on the building, which requires substantial foundation upgrades above and beyond what we're already proposing to do here. as a result of that, we're seeking a variance to allow building height to be, I believe 19 feet is what we were seeking. The building is approximately 18 feet, maybe in change, to the highest point in the roof. I'd be happy to walk you through the site plan itself and just kind of refresh on some of that, or did you want to talk about those waivers? Because the waivers and the variance kind of dictate how the site plan actually took shape. I'm happy to do it in whatever.
I always like context, but if people don't mind, I'd like to see you give us that.
Sure, so walk through the site plan?
Yeah. Why don't
Okay.
you walk us through?
So you're probably all familiar with it. It's the existing Friendly's facility, which is now vacant on Putney Road. We're proposing to redevelop that with an O'Reilly Auto Parts. The building is there about 7,200 square feet. We're going to have parking and loading that would be suitable to support their needs, but not excessively so. We've tried to lay out the site to be as efficient as possible, and with the intent of maximizing open space. You can see on the rendering and the landscaping plan that was provided with the package that we're actually doing a fair amount here in terms of street plantings and what we can to screen the parking lot. What we had talked about previously with the board was incorporating some low-level plantings that still provide visibility to the facility from Putney Road, but actually will screen the undercarriage of those vehicles as they're parked and facing the road. So you can see the facility, you can see the parking lot, but you're not going to be looking at the undercarriage of the vehicles, and we have the screening there, which today there's not a whole lot in the way of any kind of plantings. It's a limited vegetated strip along Putney Road, and then the entire property is essentially paved or building. Loading operations are going to come in through our single driveway on Putney Road. They're going to happen, generally they're anticipated to happen off hours. And why that's important is because with the site being relatively small and of an odd geometry, we want to make sure there's as much navigation room for that truck. We have designed it to accommodate a WB67 vehicle, which is the largest tractor trailer. It comes in Putney Road, and as you're looking at that plan, it would come in, turn plan right, and then maneuver into loading position, which would be along the eastern side of the building. It's not a large or lengthy loading process. They're usually efficient, in and out, and they're gone. They would typically exit onto Bradford Drive or Putney Road. Either way would be suitable for that vehicle to enter and exit from the property.
How do you access the truck? It looks like the area for it is off to the side. What, is it access along the side of the truck as opposed to the rear of it?
Typically, the driver will use a hand truck. You know, they'll like that little gate. Yeah. Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
We've designed the stormwater. You'll probably find that it's vastly improved from the existing condition, which is essentially limited catch basins, straight pipe out to the brook, the stream. What we're proposing to do here, in addition to reducing impervious surface, which is substantial in its own right because you're allowing that water to get through the native soils, we're proposing an infiltration basin out behind the O'Reilly building. That's going to collect rooftop runoff, allow it to infiltrate through the soil, and then be directed in the direction of that receiving body, being the brook. Stormwater that's collected on the paved surfaces is going to be collected via deep sump-footed catch basins and then directed through a proprietary stormwater quality unit that's going to separate out your floatables and your solids, the sediment, sand from snow removal operations, and then treat that stormwater before it's discharged. Currently, there is no treatment. It's catch basin, straight pipe, and then downhill. So you'll see in our drainage calculations that there's a substantial improvement over the existing condition on both fronts. We've designed the infiltration basin out back to essentially capture the 100-year storm event, and without overtopping. It overtops by an inch in a 100-year, and that's more of a relief valve just to make sure you have a belt and suspenders, if you will, on our stormwater design. Lighting is consistent with lighting in this corridor. It's been designed to be dark sky compliant. It's going to have the no halo effect, if you will, and no spill. It's going to be shielded and internally cast, so you have safe and suitable lighting for motorists and pedestrians, but you won't get glare or that overcast beyond the boundary, other than along Putney Road and Bradford Drive. And really, that's for safe lighting at the intersections, which, if you're going to light an intersection safely, ultimately you're going to get some of that that spill over the property boundary, but that's for safe passage for vehicles and motorists. Program is largely the same as what we had seen previously, and frankly, it's fairly simple. It's only so much you can do on 8/10 of an acre, so there's not Rubik's Cube here. And with that, I think if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, where are you putting the snow?
We have a couple of spots out back. What we've designed, if you look in the, call it the south corner, there's a large landscaped area. We've identified on the site plan as snow removal.
The south corner on Bradford Drive, or the south corner that forms the east side of the property?
We'll call it the southeast corner.
Just point, yeah.
Yeah, this rectangle here we've
Okay.
identified as snow storage. Okay. Which for this we think's appropriate, and it's not that we're going to push into a high spot. This lot is largely flat, fairly limited topo, so.
Is it graded one direction or another?
For the most part,
Or will it be a-
for the most part, the property in its existing condition flows in a west to east. It's going to flow from the lower right corner of that plan towards the upper left corner. That's probably 90% of the watershed. There is a small section along Putney Road that does drain out into the drainage infrastructure that is located by the driveway. It's small, and we've actually reduced that. And we're regrading the gutter line at the driveway. You'll notice out there that there's puddles that form every now and again, and it's just that gutter line is old. It's been beat up and settled, so we're gonna regrade that gutter and try and get positive drainage at that intersection.
Will you have fencing along that property line to Ramontos?
We have fencing along the back, and I'll just draw it on the plan.
That's right, the new
We have fencing, we're proposing fencing here, and then connected into the trash enclosure. Really, that's to protect the infiltration basin. It's more of a liability thing.
What is the type of greenery that's on the north boundary?
The north boundary?
The one that you're asking for a waiver on the setback for?
Some of you're referring to the foundation plantings, I assume, that we have along the building edge?
Yeah.
I can, you mind if I grab the landscaping plan? I don't know my Latin off the top of my head.
I mean, I don't need to know exactly what type of plant it is, but I'm wondering what type of screening the person with the parcel to the north is going to see.
That's largely ground cover. It's not intended to grow up and screen the building, if you will. So I think you mentioned the arborvitae previously. That's not what those are intended to serve. Those are more ground cover to block the foundation.
But existing, there's a bit of a jungle already in between there.
Yeah, and I can show you.
I mean, if you've got a picture, that'll clearly illustrate. You can't very well see Ramontos from Friendly's.
Correct.
Right.
So that's the boundary which you're referring to.
Okay.
We're not disturbing that buffer.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
there's quite a nature trail going down through there too.
Yeah, and there's that receiving water body which we don't want to touch, so that's in there as well. We're not, that will remain. There might be very, very limited trimming that's done just to allow, or maintenance more than anything, but that buffer will stay the same.
Can you tell us just a little bit about the character of the building?
In terms of the appearance?
Yeah, what it's going to look like.
Sure, I have an architectural elevation in the front if you'd like to see that.
Great. I assume it's pretty close to what you showed us last.
It's probably identical, as a matter of fact. That's the front of the building. They have a large glass storefront, and you can see it's framed by kind of the O'Reilly branding with their logo, and then the coloration scheme. Architect incorporated banding along the bottom, which is different material to add some architectural enhancement there.
It's corrugated steel, the colored part, and block. base.
Correct. That is, I think that's the 19. It's a simulated brick, so it'll be cement, but it'll have the appearance of brick, and then it'll be a complementary color to the rest of the building.
And I assume everything is some sort of masonry, whether it's formed to look like brick or block or something else.
Correct. Yeah, it'd be like a cementous material. Yeah, and then the building, as you mentioned before, would be metal.
Oh,
Yeah.
This says you're providing a bike rack.
That's correct.
Where is it?
The bike
See right there?
we are proposing is right here in the front right corner.
See what those little lines are. Oh, right there. Oh, is it?
Yeah. You have to forgive me, I still find new stuff that I don't know how to read on these plans.
That's me too.
Just looking out for you.
I look at them every day.
We've got two handicap.
Is there two entrances?
There's the primary, which is on Putney, and then there'll be a secondary connection to Bradford, which is consistent with the existing condition. We tried to mimic the existing, but formalize it, because today it's a little bit unformal.
Right. Will you try and focus all your primary retail traffic to the main Putney Road one? And
That
just
would-
leave that other for service, or how will that go?
That would be the idea. I don't know that that's going to be a conscious effort, but I suspect, given the formalization of the driveway on Putney Road, and well, Putney Road being the primary road that accesses this corridor anyway, that you're going to see most of your traffic up that driveway.
How about the building too? Will that ingress both sides or just the front?
The front, there are access doors on the side of the building that are really for emergency egress, and then the vendor door that's for loading and unloading.
Gotcha.
So this is the line is here.
So let's get into your waiver criteria first.
Certainly.
On a fundamental level, why do you need the two waivers?
On a fundamental, I'll start with lot coverage. The parcel's got a little bit of an odd geometry. You're fronting on two roads there, and it's for us. It's operationally, we have to make sure that one we're dimensionally compliant with the underlying zoning criteria from a parking standpoint. Not only is parking standpoint too, but you want to make sure that the site is safe for access and egress, and loading and emergency access being one of those. So the driveways that are on this property have been designed not only for the loading vehicle, but for emergency access. You got to get emergency responders to the property in the event that's necessary. Both of those factors require us to exceed the impervious surface on the property. And as I mentioned before, it's a pretty significant reduction. When you look at 16% over the existing condition, that's fairly substantial. I think, in my mind, that's an improvement.
Sure. I think most people would agree with you. How about the other waiver?
The other waiver was for the encroachment into the building setback, which is on the northern boundary. The primary motivating factor for that was for us to enhance that landscape buffer around the southern boundary. And you can see we've gotten really, really skinny with our loading bay. If you were to look at an O'Reilly prototype, it is substantially wider than that. And they even have customer parking on that side. We've eliminated all of that. And we pushed the building consciously into that setback in order for us to provide some form of screening along that southern boundary, and then configured the building and the parking layout to enable that big rectangular area that I referred to earlier as the snow storage. Both of those factors kind of pushed that building over there. And like I said before, that was a conscious effort on our part to utilize the existing vegetated buffer as much as we can, and then provide that screening on that side as well.
So if it was 10 feet back the south, your loading area would be forced to go towards that line, and you couldn't screen.
I'd probably mirror it. I'd probably mirror this and then put the parking in there.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, I could reconfigure it to make it work. Just from our standpoint, from a practical sense, this kind of got the spirit and intent, in my opinion, is a better layout and more functional.
I want to make sure we discuss the waiver criteria before we move on to variance. Does anybody else have questions about that before we get into the variances? Okay, so let's talk about the height issue.
The variance one?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have your letter from the engineer, and thank you for getting that. That's very helpful to us. The engineer, as I understand it, indicates that the reason the building needs to be shorter is because the force of the wind is going to create more pressure on the foundation. What would need to happen for the foundation to be stout enough to take the wind at the height that the zoning ordinance requires?
So, just as a little bit of context.
And if I'm not saying this correctly, don't.
No, you have it, you have
correct
it.
me.
You have it. Just for context, the soils on this site are really, really poor from a structural standpoint. They're easily liquefiable, and what that means, they start working like a liquid, so they're gonna flow, and they're not gonna be that friction that you need, that stability, that strength. That happens with an earthquake. And this part of the world is in a different seismic classification, and even if you didn't have that, the dirt isn't very good. With that, in order to build this facility, we have to do substantial foundation upgrades. We're looking at doing what's referred to as a geopier. And that's, if you're familiar with it, it's also a different form of a pile foundation. It's essentially rammed aggregate piers that they drive into the ground, which gives you the strength that the underlying soils can't do. That is, requires some significant engineering. It's also very, very expensive and requires a substantial amount of dirt moving to make all that come together. If you make the building higher, you're adding more of a surface area for that wind to push. Now the building has to, and the foundation for that matter, has to resist that overturning of that lateral wind load. It drives the foundation design even further down that road. So from a structural standpoint, it becomes quite significant. And 5 feet, all of a sudden, as you get higher, the wind gets stronger. That overturning moment becomes much greater, and the foundation becomes exponentially more significant. So with that's the driving factor behind our request for the variances. From our perspective, operationally, the building doesn't need to be higher. Architecturally, you'd just be adding a 5-foot parapet, but you'd be incredibly increasing the structural components of the building. So for us, it doesn't, in my opinion anyway, enhance the architectural appearance of the building, but it's a substantial burden on the project to upgrade the foundation.
And there's no alternative way to mitigate that wind other than drilling deeper piers?
You'd have to upgrade your foundation because you'd have a solid wall that the wind can hit, and then you're into your structural components of the building.
You couldn't have a pitched roof to that height, say? Or that wouldn't work because it wouldn't.
You still get wind loading on that, and then all of a sudden you'd have no room for the HVAC units or some of the building components because on a pitched roof they don't fit there.
Well, I mean, if you pitched it so that at the sides it was 14 feet, and in the center 24.
You still get a lateral load on it. Even if it's pitched, you still get a lateral wind load. It may not be quite as significant, but you're still substantially increasing the load at which the wind's going to hit that, or the force that the wind would deliver to the building.
Okay. Do people have other questions regarding this application?
Why is the height of variance and not a waiver?
Because the zoning ordinances don't provide for a waiver from the height requirement.
Even though it's a dimensional requirement?
I can't remember why it's like that. It's just,
You were in charge then, Jim.
I should know, but I just know they're not subject to waiver.
There are a lot of different structures that have automatic waivers for height limits. So
This just doesn't have to be one of them?
that's right.
Can you remind me?
The type of building?
Things like chimneys and architectural features can be exempt from the height limits. But one of the ideas of this district is to have higher buildings to lessen the feel of strip development, so it's not waivable.
Can you remind me how the ordinance treats a facade, whether it considers the height of the facade the building height? I know we discussed this at one point, but I can't remember what the conclusion was.
in this case, it is, for this building, it would be the height of the facade would be the building.
Height of the facade. So they could conceivably have a 24-foot facade with the rest of the building 17 feet 6 inches and 14 feet 10 inches to meet the requirement.
It's very specific. I'd have to read.
We had our structural engineer look at that.
What's that?
The structural engineer considered that, even though you have that wall,
Yeah.
it still has to resist that overturning moment. So you're just,
Okay.
what you'd be doing is you'd be putting that wind at the 24-foot mark, and it transfers that load down through the foundations, which in turn, that's really what keeps the building going, especially here with dirt.
Right. So we got some complex issues with the waiver and the variance. If there are no questions, well, I should ask if there are any questions from the public. I know we've got some members of the public. You can feel free to ask questions if you wish.
Keep it late,
That's okay.
because I thought this was gonna be at the end.
No, we had a number of applications who either asked to have their, applicants who asked to have their applications dismissed or continued yesterday,
This morning.
this morning. So we were as surprised as anybody. I need to, don't worry, I will swear in. I need to swear you in because we're on the record. And I need you to come up to the microphone and identify yourself.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry, it's because there are people at home watching this on public access TV.
Okay,
No, that microphone right there. You see that one right there?
okay.
Okay, so first I'm going to swear you in, okay? Can you please raise your right hand? Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, and now can you say who you are, and you can ask a question or make a comment,
Okay.
whatever you like.
My name is Mary Bachman. Don't even know if the left side there
Quick-
is the.
Quick question before you get it. Are you in a butter, or do you live in the area, or,
No, I have a house in Brattleboro,
oh, okay. Where's that house?
1 Testament Drive.
Okay. So you just have some interest in the project?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the boundary line on the left, is that what abuts the pizza restaurant?
Correct.
Okay. And I was mostly interested, I think you were talking about a little bit when I came in, were the trees
Yep.
on that stream side, are they going to remain?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
There are not that many.
Right, and most of those trees, actually, I can show you, are not even on our boundary. We don't really have control of them. They're off the property.
Good.
Triple damages if we cut them down.
Yeah, right. So this is the boundary, I assume you're referring to. We're proposing to maintain that. There may be limited we have to do just to facilitate the improvements or clear or maintain, but by and large, that'll be intact.
So you're tucking the building way back in the left part of the property, right?
Correct. We're actually going to stay, the building will be on what is currently paved or parking lot.
And are you keeping any of the arborvitae that, you have 18 arborvitae there
On that boundary?
in the whole property?
If it's not within the limits of our work, it'll remain. If it's in the middle of what we have to do to redevelop the property, then it will be re-landscaped with the landscaping plan that we have in our site development package.
Can you show him where the arborvitae, I never pronounce this right. I don't know why we have to discuss arborvitae so much. But can you show
It's
him where that is?
arborvitae.
Because that would be a better answer.
So this is.
Arborvitae?
Arborvitae, yes.
Okay.
Let me see. So they're on the stockade fence. They're on this side of the stockade fence. Here, and there's some over here. Here, and over there.
Let's take a look. I can find
Is that helpful to you to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll take a look and I can show you our general limit of work for that. So, this is the plan.
So they're, is this the stockade fence?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're here and there, and then there are probably 4 over here.
Those, let me take the grade. Just confirm for you. The ones that are along this edge here,
Yeah,
those are probably gonna have to be removed as part of the grading. Because it's just so narrow. We're re-landscaping that pretty substantially though. And in here, we can talk to the team about trying to minimize the disturbance that we have to do to grade that out. If they're savable, we'll try and keep them for you.
okay.
And just so you know, landscaping is one of the things that we look at with this type of review. So it would be helpful for us, just so we create a good record, if you could explain why it's a good idea to keep those arborvitae in the microphone so
Okay.
you get the people at home pick it up. I'm sorry. It's,
That's all right.
technically, we're
They're,
taking evidence right now.
They're pretty
So.
full grown, they're tall. It takes a long time to grow them like that, and they're quite attractive, so. Just would be nice, that's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members of the public? Mr. Pichek, we had a number of applications get dismissed today. I hope you're not here for one of them. Because this,
I'm here for the.
Oh, you're here for this?
The estate of Jim Roberts.
okay. Okay, I just didn't want you to be here waiting for an application that wasn't going to get called. All right. So there are a couple of complex issues having to do with the variance and the waiver, and my suggestion would be that we take a moment to consider these in executive session. A deliberative session, excuse me. Unless you guys disagree with me, could I have a motion to do that?
I move we go to deliberative or executive session?
Deliberative session.
Deliberative session.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, it's 8:25, we're back on the record.
Okay.
We met in deliberative session and we discussed the issues relevant to this parcel and the application. There are a couple of basic things here. We need cut sheets on the exterior lighting, and the fire department requested that there be a no left turn provision for people coming out of Putney Road. I assume those are no problem for the applicant.
The access one might be a problem. Because the no left turn on the Putney Road,
Yeah,
it's not restricted today.
no, it's not.
Why would it be restricted tomorrow?
The fire department, they suggested when they reviewed the application that we restrict that because it's an extremely difficult left-hand turn to make and because you can take a right and go around the rotary.
We'd have to talk to, we can't agree to that tonight. We have to obviously talk to the tenant, bidding a ride. That, the intent would be that would be a full access driveway. I know we didn't discuss traffic at length tonight, but I think the board should have in that package the traffic assessment that was conducted as part of this project. Just generally speaking, O'Reilly would have a substantially less, or would be anticipated to have a substantially less traffic impact than would a restaurant facility. And given that there's the opposing left turn lane out there that would allow a vehicle to come out, you know, and have to kind of steer that left turning movement if there were large volume on Putney Road that precluded them from doing it. That's kind of the intent of those lanes, is for that safe landing spot before somebody would merge into the flow of traffic. I would still like to have a full turn movement, and something we could certainly work through with the fire department and maybe talk through that item with them.
Well, we can always approve the application contingent on approved by the fire department of turn lanes.
Okay. I'm comfortable doing that, and if that conversation results in additional discussion, we can certainly revisit that with the board and the planning staff, I imagine, correct? Okay.
So, we discussed both the waiver and the variance criteria. And first of all, I just have to thank you for your application. I've been on this board for almost 6 years now, and this was one of the most thorough and complete applications I've ever seen. It was really helpful to us.
Thank you.
We get a lot of lousy applications. I don't know if it's credit to you or discredit to the applicants of Wyndham County, but it was a really pleasant experience to understand this project without having to make a bunch of assumptions. The board unanimously concludes that the waivers, that both waivers for the impervious surface and the setback are appropriate based on the substantial improvement of the parcel in terms of reduction in impervious surface, improvement in stormwater drainage, mitigation of damage to Crosby Brook, the screening that already exists that protects what we keep on calling the pizza parcel here, and the general improvement of the character of that neighborhood that the rebuild of that parcel is going to create. The variance is a more complicated issue because our statutory criteria for the variance is stricter than the criteria for waiver. And one of the findings that we would have to make in order to grant the variance is that the physical circumstances prevent the property from possibly being developed, and a variance is necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. It's clear that the reason you're offering us is accurate, and you've offered us an engineer's report that backs up everything you've said. But the challenge is that the way to mitigate that, it appears to be possible to drive the pilings deeper and build this to the minimum height. Now, we're dealing with new with new zoning ordinances, and this is the first time this issue's crossed our desks. And it's fair to say that nobody on the DRB sees any good reason that this building should be 24 feet tall. However, that's the zoning ordinance that we're forced to make a legal ruling on. And we can't grant a variance even if we want to unless the applicant meets the second criteria. And we're disappointed to find that the physical circumstances don't completely prevent the property from being developed at 24 feet, nor is the variance necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. We looked hard at the regulations and tried to figure out a way in which height might be achieved without creating the problem that the engineer identified. And we're more than comfortable approving the application with the waivers and a condition that the zoning administrator accept the building design. And our suspicion is there may be a way to reach that building height without actually building a 24-foot high building, whether it's from a design element that needs
Like a cupola or something?
Maybe. The sections of the zoning ordinance that regulate building height are Brian, are found at 217, which indicates what you need to do with respect to the facade. There's some facade requirements, and they're at 212J. And I'd also suggest you take a long, hard look at the definition. I'm sorry. Brian, do you recall where the height chart is in the back of the book?
No, I found James.
Just give me 1 second. On 5-4, there's a chart, figure 5.3, that discusses dimensional standards and building height. And the way the regulations are set up is to allow for something like a cupola to exceed the height, but they don't appear necessarily to state that the cupola can't be considered for the height.
Okay.
So we're going to vote to deny the variance, but I just suggest that you work with the zoning administrator to try to figure out a way to efficiently meet the height requirement that we don't feel we can grant the variance for. in a way that doesn't cause the project to become extremely problematic.
Okay, so do you mind if I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Relative to the criteria, I think you mentioned it was criteria too, right? And I'm certainly not, I'm not trying to be antagonistic, just want to make sure I understand
No, that's okay.
it. The word that stuck out to me, maybe I'm being too specific, was reasonable. And to me, with the applicant installing a substantial, or looking at doing a substantial foundation upgrade, not having seen that criteria or vetted it fully in my mind anyway, would consider that to be...
That's at 4.2, by the way.
I'm sorry?
It's at section 4-2 of the
Okay.
regulations, and if you'd like, I can give it to you so you can have it in front of you.
The word that being reasonable, and I know the board has spent a lot of time discussing it. I'm not disagreeing with your interpretation, making sure I understand it. Reasonable, I would say, what we're proposing to do with the foundation is reasonable, and if we have to substantially upgrade that anymore, it becomes unreasonable. It's going to put a substantial burden on the project. I don't know that the project is viable if we have to do any more than what we're already contemplating. So maybe I'm being too detailed and looking at the word reasonable, but that's the word that stuck out to me. Second, my other question was, working with the zoning administrator and then staff, by denial of the variance, the other avenue of working with staff, I want to make sure that, from my client's perspective, that doesn't lead to a roadblock and that we can't get through it. Now we have a denied variance, we all of a sudden can't do our project because we determined that the 24-foot building height isn't a viable option from our perspective. Now we're kind of at an impasse.
So, let me address what you said in order. The exact variance language, it's not section 4-2. This is wrong in our memorandum. Do you recall if it's in the land use regulations or is that statutory?
Sorry, I agree.
This is the wording we got in the workshop.
Okay. So, variance criteria is, it's not just a town ordinance, it's a state statute that's reflected in every town ordinance. And the criteria comes from 24 VSA 4469, so Title 24, Section 4469. And what the state statute says is that there's no you can grant the variance if there's no possibility that the property can be developed in conformance with the bylaws and no reasonable use can be made of the existing property without variance.
Okay, so that's the context in which reasonable is being used.
The legislature wrote this and gave it to us.
And I guess
And
reasonable is up for in the eye of the beholder, right? It's in terms of, sure, you could develop
Well, it
something
says
that-
no reasonable use. Technically, they could be implying that you could go back into friendlies and wind it up again,
Yeah.
and that would be a reasonable use.
Yeah, I suppose, I guess depending upon what the use would be.
Myself, I'm frustrated by it. I get their wording, but I see no reasonable reason why your building needs to be 24 feet. But I didn't make those.
No, I know
make
you're
those
handcuffed
rules.
by the box in which you operate. I understand, and I think the condition of working through and finding an interpretation of building height that doesn't require us to do substantial foundation upgrades above what we're already contemplating. I think that seems like an avenue we'd like to pursue, but I don't want that to be a dead end, if you will, and all of a sudden this project is.
I think procedurally it's important that you understand that the board, when it says that something can be done administratively, they're giving you a streamlined option of how to proceed, but they're not locking you into it.
Okay.
If you ever reach a point where you feel that you disagree with the determination I have made, or you have proposed something and I've refused it, that's something that's immediately appealable back to the board.
Okay.
So you're not trapped by administrative review, it's just a tool that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm not suggesting we're going to disagree with you. I just want to make sure that,
It's not a cul-de-sac.
We
Right.
overturn him from time to time.
I'm sorry?
We overturn him from time to time.
Okay.
It happens. I mean,
I just want to make sure all options are available as we discussed it. I think, provided that's not, a dead end or a wall, I think we're certainly amendable to seeing if that bears fruit. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We do legal trainings periodically, and one of the trainings that we just did was on variances, and we went through a number of cases that dealt with what reasonable use is. I was looking at the packet that we received in this training before, and both the environmental court and the Supreme Court have taken a broad view of what that reasonable use might mean.
It's a fine shade of gray, right?
They almost always find against the applicant, indicating that there is some other reasonable use out there. And with that knowledge in hand, it's hard for us to find otherwise. I mean, it would essentially require for us to, having reviewed these cases, find contrary to the understanding of the precedent we have with respect to this exact legal issue.
We appreciate the thoroughness with which you reviewed that. I mean, certainly that's commendable, and I appreciate that. And also for offering us another option to pursue, an opportunity to try and meet the spirit and intent of the ordinances that's defined in the bylaw.
And just to further offer you some idea of what's going on here, we're putting this on a list of things because these are new zoning ordinances. We plan to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission that drafts these ordinances. We do this every year. And this is one thing that we've put aside to talk to them about. And it is theoretically possible, as another avenue, that you could ask the Planning Commission to amend this ordinance.
Okay.
And if ever the Planning Commission is going to be sensitive about a set of zoning regs that they just wrote all of a sudden not working, they now have a record of us on the DRB saying, well, we don't love enforcing this ordinance. We don't think it dramatically improves the character of the building to increase its height. I mean, we don't think the neighborhood is beautified by a 24-foot block building as opposed to a 14-foot block building. Nobody on this board thinks that. And that's another avenue that you could go down if you're frustrated by trying to figure it out with the zoning administrator. There have been situations, I used to serve on the Planning Commission and I was its chair. Sometimes things come up that the Planning Commission doesn't account for. Like we had food trucks that became a fad and there was no zoning ordinance related to food trucks. So the people that own the food trucks, they came to a meeting and they said, this is what we want to do. And we crafted a zoning ordinance that more or less specifically applied to food trucks. Now is a time when the Planning Commission would be right to hear you folks come in and say, hey, we want a block building that's not too tall, and we don't think anyone in Brattleboro really wants tall block buildings. Maybe you should look at making this a waiver issue rather than a variance issue. Because if this was a waiver issue, I'm sure we'd grant it.
Okay.
I didn't talk to anybody on the board, but we were so thoroughly impressed by your application that I'm very confident we would.
Okay. So, if I may be presumptuous, just provided the board finds it appropriate or wishes to approve the application with conditions, one of those conditions would be to work with planning staff and the zoning administrator on the building architect.
We wouldn't even make it a condition. We're just offering you that if we approve this application, since we would deny the variance separately, you can go to the zoning administrator and have him tell you whether or not you're meeting that requirement, because now you don't have the
Okay,
variance.
so we could put, you could speak with us and the project architect, and we could find an interpretation of the ordinance that we all agree with and see if we can make something work with the building.
If he agrees with you, you never have to see us again. If he doesn't agree with you, you can appeal his decision and put it before us a second time.
Okay, do you,
Yeah, that's fine.
And I mean, you can do this stuff concurrently too. You could try to have the Planning Commission change that ordinance to make it a waiver as you're working with Mr. Bannon to try to figure out a way to deal with it without having a
okay,
variance.
all right, so then, I feel comfortable, and I gather you do too. Yeah, that we can.
What's the process for the text amendment with the planning commission? If you can speak.
You have to,
Yeah.
it's a warned meeting just like this.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Sue would have to go through them.
If you call Sue Fillion at the planning department, she can guide you through it. I could have told you before the new zoning regulations when I was on the planning commission because we had this. I can't remember if it changed. They
Okay.
tried to streamline it to some degree.
Okay.
You just had a meeting. You
Yeah,
just had a
they
meeting.
meet on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Um,
Is there a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, or do they have the ultimate decision in the text amendment?
If they're going to amend the ordinance, what has to happen is it has to go before the select board. After they've approved it, the select board has to warn a meeting. For amendments that are small like this, it's somewhat frequent that you don't have to actually show up and there's no public that's going to comment on it. And you can send things to the select board to consider. And I can't imagine why they would deny something that the planning commission did that is this narrow, changing a roof height requirement from a variance to a waiver. I mean, that's not really a hot button issue.
I wouldn't think so.
Um,
It's 2 meetings then, right?
That's 2 meetings.
Got it.
You definitely would have to go to the planning commission. I'm not sure you'd have to go to the select board meeting if the planning commission approved it. I would be surprised if it was an issue. It wasn't that big of an issue. The last one we did, I remember, it went through the select board with very little discussion. That was a couple of years ago. So, these are our suggestions.
They're very helpful, and I
We're not happy about
appreciate
this,
that.
But we have an obligation to follow the laws that's written.
We understand.
I understand completely, and we appreciate you helping us identify a process to which maybe we can move that forward.
So, that said, I move to approve, I suggest we have a motion to approve application 2016-11 with the condition that the fire department approve the ingress and egress, and the applicant provide a lighting cut sheet to the zoning administrator for approval.
That's with no waivers and no.
We're not even discussing the waivers.
Okay.
We're just doing this with, I mean, we're not even discussing the variance. This is
Or the waivers.
for the waiver. We're gonna do this 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Okay. So any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Now, if I could have a motion to approve the 2 requests for variance for impervious surface. Exceeding-
Waivers, right.
For exceeding the impervious surface limit and exceeding, or impinging into the 10-foot northern setback.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so all those are in favor of approving the waiver request?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the way we do this, remember, is to have a positive motion to approve the variance.
And then we vote against it.
What, you vote however
vote
you
however you
want.
Right.
I'm not gonna tell you to do that. The motion is to approve,
Right.
not to deny.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And all those opposed?
Right.
So you're all set. Thank you for
Okay.
coming.
Thank you.
And our apologies that you have to be the litmus test or the canary for the
You-
zoning.
No need to apologize. We appreciate you being so thorough. You know, I mean, that's commendable, and we'll figure something out.
If you'd like, this probably wouldn't come up unless you want to appeal Mr. Bannon, but you could give them the training package on the variance, right? We have, it's basically Vermont law for people that want the cases distilled down to 1 paragraph, and it'll go through the reasonable use issues piece by piece. And you could see the training package that we received that's informing how we act here, and that might help you
Okay.
if you want to appeal it, if you end up appealing Mr. Bannon or if some other issue comes up.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
So
So-
thank you.
we're all set, and then there'll be a formal finding of fact that'll be issued.
You're gonna get a decision within 45 days. It usually comes out within 2 weeks.
Okay.
And Mr. Bannon has to draft it, I look at it, and then I sign it or make changes.
Okay.
And he'll get that to you. You can get it to him by email.
You have our contact information,
As
yes.
as soon as I sign it, you'll have it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. We
That's quick.
appreciate it.
That's
Thanks.
like-
Brian,
yes,
do
okay.
we need to move to continue those other ones?
I'm gonna cover that.
Okay, my question, do we
So,
want to hold
um,
people, or
I first want to deal with the motions for continuances by Delta Epsilon and Women Foundation. If we could just have those going.
no? In that case,
Are there any that I'm missing?
nope. Just two of them.
Two continuances.
Don't be offended, but Brian Cash is me.
Sorry.
I'm just used to him thumbing them up.
Okay.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Now, with respect to the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center project, we received a request from Attorney Miskovich to dismiss those without prejudice. Now, one of those applications is an application, and we can do that. The other application is an appeal of Mr. Bannon. And in my view, we can't dismiss that with or without prejudice. I think we can only dismiss it.
Oh,
Because an appeal is a different animal than an application. And it's got time limits, and you have a time limit in which you have to start your appeal. And if they're dismissing that appeal, I'm not sure whether they can come back.
Whether that ticks the clock or not?
I don't know. I don't think we have to make a decision on whether they can come back, but I don't think we can dismiss it with prejudice, and I don't think we can dismiss it without prejudice. I think we just dismiss it.
oh,
So that would be 2016-7.
Yeah.
We
Right.
just dismissed.
Move to discuss.
That's right. So my suggestion is we have a motion to dismiss the application, which is 242, first, and then we have, without prejudice, and then we have a motion to dismiss application 2016-7.
Someone?
second,
Well, can we call this first the motion to dismiss without prejudice?
yes.
Okay. Okay, second, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then can we have a motion to dismiss 2016-7, which is the appeal?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.